An ancient library, seal cracks under Elara's trembling hands. She is a young scholar, driven by a cryptic map. A map that whispers of the Lost Archives of Valinor. To be caught means permanent exile, a fate worse than death for someone of her calling. Yet the promise hidden within those fabled texts is too great to ignore. The chance to restore her family's shattered honor and uncover the long-buried secrets of the Undying Lands is a risk her heart demands she take. By the end of this tale, you will know the profound truths she unearthed and the ultimate price of such forbidden knowledge. What ancient powers slumber behind those sealed doors, and what do they demand in return for their wisdom? Wherever you are in the world right now, and whatever the hour, feel free to share your corner of the globe with me. What would you dare to learn if you knew it could change everything? The starlight bent through the crystal prism, painting a shimmering web of constellations across the ancient parchment. For a breathtaking moment, the map itself seemed to breathe, its hidden layers peeling back to reveal a celestial chart etched in silver light. But the beautiful vision was shattered by a low, resonant hum that vibrated through the stone floor. The silent watchers were awakening, their ethereal forms, usually dormant statues in distant alcoves, now glided through the library's vast halls, their presence a cold pressure in the air. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed for her to run, to abandon the glowing chart, and flee back into the safety of obscurity. But the coordinates shimmering before her were the first real key, the only proof her desperate theory was correct. To leave now was to lose everything. Her hand, trembling only slightly, moved with a frantic purpose as she scrambled to transcribe the star paths onto a scrap of vellum. Each second stretched into an eternity, each scratch of her quill a deafening noise in the oppressive silence. She could feel the watchers drawing closer, their search patterns tightening like a net. This was no longer a scholarly exercise. It was a theft, and she was the thief. With the final symbol copied, she rolled the vellum and extinguished her light. Slipping into the deep shadows between bookshelves, she felt the chill of a watcher pass mere feet away. The chart was clear. It pointed not to another library or a hidden city, but to a remote and storm-racked island at the very edge of all known maps. Her quest had just become terrifyingly real. Elara melted into the night, the library doors closing behind her with a sound of final judgment. The howling wind that greeted her did not feel like a simple weather pattern. It sounded like a chorus of voices, a stark warning carried across the sea from the place she was now destined to go. The whispering woods lived up to their name from the very first step. The trees did not rustle, they murmured, their leaves forming words too soft to fully grasp, a constant susurration of half-heard secrets that frayed the edges of Elara's resolve. For 3 days, she followed the celestial chart, its star paths, leading her deeper into a labyrinth of living wood, where the very light seemed hesitant to enter. The map was clear, but the path was not. It demanded a key, a riddle whispered on the wind. As dawn broke on the 4th day, a voice, ancient and resonant as the roots beneath her feet, spoke a single, clear sentence from the grove around her. A path opens only for the seeker who understands that to hold light, one must first embrace the dark. Elara stood frozen, the words echoing in the quiet morning. It was a paradox. Her entire quest was for light, for enlightenment, for the lost wisdom of the ages. To embrace the dark felt like a betrayal. She thought of her family's disgrace, the shadow that had fallen over their name, the very darkness she sought to erase. And in that moment of painful reflection, the answer clicked into place. It was not about surrendering to evil, but about acknowledging the void that knowledge fills. One must first admit ignorance, the dark absence of understanding, before any light of wisdom can be received. As she whispered this interpretation to the grove, the air before her shimmered. Where there was once only tangled undergrowth, a narrow, mossy path now gleamed in the dawn light, visible for only a few precious minutes. Waiting for her on that path was Leor. He was less a man and more an extension of the forest itself, his skin like bark, his eyes holding the deep, patient green of the oldest leaves. He had been watching, he said, and her answer had proven she was different from the others. He offered her shelter and guidance, a temporary alliance forged in the crucible of the Riddle, but his help came with a grave warning. He spoke of other seekers who had passed this way, their minds brilliant and intentions initially pure, all consumed by the very knowledge they sought from the Lost Archives. They did not find enlightenment, Leor explained, his voice low and sorrowful. They found a mirror, and in it, they saw only their own limitless ambition reflected back at them, magnified until it devoured everything else. His words struck a deep, resonant chord of doubt within Elara. Was her quest truly for restoration and understanding, or was it, at its core, a masked hunger for the power to rewrite her own history? The righteousness of her mission wavered, and for a terrifying moment, she saw herself as Leor might, just another prideful soul marching toward her own ruin. This internal conflict was a battle far more daunting than any physical trial. Yet, staring into the face of this potential future, she made a conscious choice. She reaffirmed her vow, not to her family's name, but to the knowledge itself. She would approach the archives as a student, not a conqueror. She would seek to understand, not to possess. Seeing the conviction solidify in her eyes, Leor nodded slowly. He gave her one final, cryptic piece of advice. To navigate the final trials, she would need to find a heart of stone that does not feel, yet breaks for the truth. Puzzled but trusting, Elara committed the phrase to memory. It was then that Leor revealed the true escalation of her danger. She was not alone in her hunt. Another, a man named Kalin, was also seeking the archives. He was a former scholar like her, but one who had been cast out for dangerous, reckless experiments. He sought the secrets not for wisdom, but for dominion, and he was close, very close, armed with this new warning and a direction she did not fully understand. Elara pressed on, leaving the safety of Leor's grove. The woods felt different now, every shadow potentially holding the shape of a rival, each step forward a step closer to his lurking shadow. The forest thinned abruptly, giving way to a river of impossible stillness. Its surface was not water but a swirling, liquid silver, a perfect mirror reflecting a sky that was not there. This was the river of reflections, and its silence was more unnerving than any whisper of the woods. To cross, the lore stated, required a vessel of pure intent, a raft woven from the enchanted reeds that grew along its bank, reeds that hummed with a faint, sympathetic energy. Elara worked quickly, her fingers weaving the pliant stalks. each one seeming to tighten of its own accord, as if testing the truth in her heart. The final knot was a question, and the raft held firm, accepting her answer. Pushing off from the bank was like pushing into a dream. The moment the raft touched the silver surface, the visions began. They were not loud or violent, but insidious, rising from the depths with the quiet certainty of memory. She saw her father, his face etched with a shame she had spent her life trying to wash away. But then the vision shifted, twisting. She saw the council that had cast him out, and for the first time, she saw the flicker of fear in their eyes, the deliberate omission of a key testimony. Her family's disgrace was not the result of his failure, but of a political lie, a convenient narrative crafted to remove a voice that challenged the established order. A raw, furious grief welled up inside her, so potent it nearly capsized the fragile raft. The river fed on this turmoil, this sudden vulnerability, the peaceful life she had secretly yearned for. A small cottage filled with books and quiet sunsets bloomed before her eyes with such vivid clarity, it felt more real than the raft beneath her feet. She could almost feel the warmth of a hearth she had never known, a peace purchased by simply turning back. The temptation was a physical ache, a siren song promising an end to her struggle. But the newfound truth of her father's innocence burned brighter than any false comfort. To turn back now would be to let that lie stand forever, to allow the architects of that deceit to win. She looked directly into the heart of the peaceful illusion and made her choice. She embraced the mission, not as a path to personal redemption, but as a means to expose a foundational falsehood. The vision of the cottage shattered like glass on the silver river. In that moment of painful clarity, the true scale of her quest crashed down upon her. The secrets within the Lost Archives were not merely forgotten facts. They were foundational truths, capable of rewriting history, of toppling long-held beliefs, of altering the course of countless lives who lived in the shadow of those lies. This was no longer a personal vendetta. It was a responsibility. As her raft neared the far shore, her eyes caught a flicker of orange light in the growing dusk. A campfire, and sitting beside it, sharpening a blade with methodical precision, was Kalin. He had crossed before her. He looked up, his gaze meeting hers across the water, and a slow, knowing smile spread across his face. The confrontation was no longer a possibility, waiting in the shadows. It was here. Reaching the opposite bank, Elara stepped onto solid ground, her resolve hardened into something cold and sharp. She looked toward the distant glow of Kalin's fire, a beacon not of warmth, but of the conflict she now had to face. The fire cast shifting shadows across Kalin's face, making his smile look like a crack in stone. He did not stand or threaten her, simply continued sharpening his blade, the rhythmic scrape of metal on stone, a deliberate counterpoint to the pounding of Elara's heart. He spoke first, his voice deceptively calm. He knew who she was, of course. He knew of her father and the stain on her name. He offered her a deal, a partnership. He had strength and resources she lacked. All he required was her celestial chart. Together, they could unlock the archives, and she could have the honor of presenting the discovery to the world, cleansing her family's legacy in a single, glorious moment. It was a tempting poison, wrapped in the very redemption she craved, but she saw the hunger in his eyes, a void that no amount of knowledge could ever fill, only widen. He did not want to restore history. He wanted to rewrite it with himself as its god. Her scholarly ethics screamed against the thought. The very idea of deceit felt like a betrayal of the pure pursuit of knowledge. But Leor's warning echoed in her mind. This man was a contagion. To give him what he wanted was to unleash that contagion upon the world. The greater good, the truth she now sought for all, demanded a different kind of strength. So she let her shoulders slump. She allowed a flicker of desperate hope into her voice, carefully weaving a performance of a tired, overwhelmed scholar. She agreed, her voice barely a whisper. She would show him the map. As she unrolled the vellum, her movements slow and resigned, her eyes caught the glint of an artifact tucked into his belt. It was a compass, its casing a pale, pearlescent stone that seemed to hold a sliver of moonlight within it, the heart of stone that does not feel, yet breaks for the truth. This was it. While Kalin leaned in, his gaze greedily devouring the star paths on her map, her hand darted out not for the map, but for the compass. It was not a violent grab, but a swift, fluid pluck, like taking a ripe fruit from a branch. She was already turning, already running, before his mind could even process the betrayal. The roar that followed was not one of mere anger, but of pure, undiluted fury. He vowed then, his voice tearing through the night, that he would shatter every step of her path. He would break her, and then he would take everything. The rivalry was now a blood feud. Clutching the cold, smooth compass in her hand, Elara fled into the jagged landscape, his promises of vengeance chasing her like wolves. The artifact felt alive, its needle twitching insistently, no longer pointing north, but pulling her toward a line of formidable, snow-capped peaks, now visible in the distance. A new understanding bloomed with each frantic step. The mountain pass it indicated was no mere geographical feature. The whispers of old tales spoke of the spire of the first dawn, a place guarded not by physical beasts, but by ancient, sentient wards that tested the spirit of any who dared approach. As the first cold drops of rain began to fall, the moon-touched compass glowed softly in her palm, a lonely guide into the gathering storm. The mountain pass was a labyrinth of stone and illusion. The pearlescent compass grew warm in Elara's hand, its needle pulling her toward solid rock faces that shimmered and parted only at the last possible second, revealing narrow ledges where before there was only a sheer drop. These were not physical barriers, but magical wards, ancient sentinels that preyed on the mind. They twisted perception, making up look like down and solid ground, feel like empty air. The only constant was the wind, a low, constant moan through the crags. She soon realized its pitch was not random. It rose and fell in a specific, repeating sequence, a three-note melody of air and stone. To step against the rhythm was to be thrown back by an invisible force, her body aching with disorientation. She had to move with the wind, placing each footfall in the silent pause between its exhales. It was a slow, agonizing dance of patience against the frantic ticking of time in her own mind. When she finally stepped past the final illusory cliff, the ground trembled. Stone grated against stone as a massive form unfolded from the mountainside itself. It was the guardian, a being of sculpted granite and glowing crystal eyes, its voice the sound of a landslide. It did not threaten violence, but issued a challenge far more perilous. To pass, she must prove herself a keeper of lore, not a thief of it. She must recount the legend of the Weeping Star, a tale so old most considered it mere children's fable. Elara's heart sank. She knew the story, but the true ending, the moral, had been a subject of fierce debate in the academic circles that now scorned her. One version praised self-sacrifice, the other, pragmatic survival, which was the truth the Guardian sought. Exhausted and trembling, she made her choice. She would not tell the story it wanted to hear. She would tell the story as she understood it. Her voice, though thin against the wind, was steady as she began. She spoke of the star that fell to earth, grieving for a lost constellation, and of the mortal who found it. In the common version, the mortals sacrificed their life to return the star to the sky. But Elara spoke a different truth, one her own research had suggested. The mortal did not die. They built a vessel of memory and longing, a library of sorts, to house the star's light so all could share in its wisdom, even as it faded from the world. The act was not one of sacrifice, but of preservation. It was a choice to let a truth be known, rather than let it die a beautiful, useless death. As she finished, the Guardian's stony visage seemed to soften. You chose the harder truth, it rumbled. You seek not to possess the light, but to ensure it is not lost. Your intent is pure. The massive creature did not step aside. Instead, it crumbled, its form dissolving into a cloud of shimmering dust that settled over Elara like a cloak. A temporary protection, it whispered into her mind, a veil to shield you from the mountain's lesser tricks. But its final warning was a cold spike of fear. The path you seek is not fixed in stone. It exists only under the light of the full moon, and the moon already begins its fall. You have only hours, as if to punctuate the threat. A sharp crack echoed from the valley far below. Elara looked down to see a flicker of torchlight, a single pinprick of orange, moving with relentless speed through the illusions that had so confounded her. Kalin was not just following, he was gaining. With the Guardian's blessing humming against her skin, Elara turned and ran, the silver coin of the moon slipping lower in the sky, counting down her final moments to find the archives. The moon's last sliver of light vanished as the mountain path ended at a gaping maw in the rock. Inside, the crystal caves breathed a cold, dry air that carried the scent of ozone and age. It was not dark. Light from some unseen source bounced through 1,000 million facets, fracturing into a dizzying maze of rainbows and blinding glare. Pathways shimmered into existence, only to dissolve a few steps later, leading toward bottomless chasms or solid, glittering walls. Every surface was a lie. Elara fumbled in her pack, her fingers closing around the cold, familiar shape of the library prism. Holding it to her eye was like looking at the world's true skeleton. The chaotic light resolved into orderly beams, each one a thread of pure color. Most paths were illusions, their light scattering into nothingness, but a few, a very few, held their beam true, passing through specific, towering crystal formations that pulsed with a soft, internal rhythm. She had to align the prism with these anchor crystals to see the real route. Her first misstep was a lesson written in stone. Trusting a path that seemed solid, she placed her weight on a ledge that crumbled like sugar. The resulting crack was small, but the cascade of falling rock that followed was not. An entire corridor behind her collapsed, sealing off her retreat with a final, grinding roar. There was no going back. Pinned between the disorienting light and the constant threat of being entombed, she noticed markings etched into the bases of the anchor crystals. They were not words, but schematics, diagrams of ley lines and planetary alignments. As she pieced them together, a staggering truth emerged. The archives were not a simple repository. They were a keystone, a regulator designed to balance the world's energies, preventing magical stagnation in one region and catastrophic surges in another. This was the true purpose Leor had hinted at, a responsibility so vast it dwarfed her personal quest. The crystals seemed to feed on this realization, amplifying her fear into a deafening internal scream. What made her, a disgraced scholar, think she could handle such a power? Was she not just like Kalin, seeking a tool too great for her, blind to the ruin she might cause? The walls felt like they were closing in, the glittering facets reflecting 1,000 versions of her own doubt-ridden face. She could have frozen there, paralyzed by the magnitude of it all. But her eyes fell again on the inscriptions, on the elegant, purposeful lines. They were a plea from the builders, a call for a custodian, not a conqueror. She made her choice. She would trust the intellect that had brought her this far, and the guidance left by those who understood this power. She would move forward, not for herself, but for the balance they had sacrificed to protect. The fate of entire ecosystems, the very flow of magic in the world, now rested on her success. And then, cutting through the hum of the crystals, she heard it. A voice, distorted by echo, but unmistakably furious. Let her clear the way. The trap is always sweeter when the mouse believes it is free. Kalin was in the caves, navigating a parallel tunnel, his words a venomous promise. With a final, precise alignment of the prism, the last true path solidified before her, leading to an archway woven from roots and stone. Elara stepped through, and the oppressive, glittering pressure of the caves vanished. She stood at the edge of a hidden valley, where the air itself hummed with a latent, ancient magic, and at its center, a structure of impossible geometry promised everything she had fought to find. Silence filled the valley, a heavy, waiting quiet that seemed to absorb all sound. Then, a single, clear note hung in the air, a ghost of a song carried on the wind. Elara felt an instinctive pull, a need to answer. She hummed the note back, her voice small in the vastness. The moment she did, the valley awoke. Faint, shimmering forms began to coalesce from the mist, the ancestral spirits of this place. They did not speak with words, but with music, each one humming a fragment of a forgotten melody. To earn their trust, she had to listen, to learn, and to repeat their songs perfectly. It was a duet with the dead. Each completed melody unlocked a piece of their memory, a vision of the archive's creators. She saw them not as gods, but as wise, weary beings who had built this place as a sanctuary, not a vault. They had hidden it away not out of greed, but out of a profound fear that their greatest gift, knowledge itself, could become the world's ultimate weapon in the wrong hands. The final test was the most painful. A spirit, its song one of deep sorrow, showed her a vision of her own ancestor, a brilliant scholar who had once sought the archive centuries before. He had been turned away at this very valley. His quest had not been for wisdom, but for the prestige and power it would bring him, a hollow ambition the spirits saw right through. The shame of his failure, a secret buried in her own bloodline, washed over her. It was a devastating blow, a direct challenge to her own worthiness. Had she not been driven by the same desire to restore her family's name, to claim a power that would erase their disgrace? For a terrifying moment, she stood on the precipice of his same failure. But then she looked inward at the journey that had brought her here. She thought of the river of reflections, of the truth about her father, of the immense responsibility of the world's balance. She now understood. Her goal had shifted. It was no longer about her name, but about the truth itself. In a clear, steady voice, she did not just sing the spirit's song of sorrow back to it. She added a new note, one of understanding and acceptance, a promise to be different. The spirit's form brightened, and the fragmented melodies of the entire valley wove together into one beautiful, protective hymn. This, they told her, was the key to calming the final guardian, but their final warning was a cold dread that settled in her bones. Kalin was coming, and he did not seek to preserve. He sought to weaponize the archives, to twist its balancing energies into a force of subjugation. He believed knowledge was not a light to be shared, but a leash to be held. If he reached the entrance before the next moonrise, he could bypass the final wards and seize control. The fate the creators feared most was now hours away. Accepting the weight of this legacy, Elara made a vow to the fading spirits. She would not be a thief of knowledge, but its guardian. She would honor their sacrifice by protecting the archives from the very corruption they had foreseen. Humming the newly learned protective melody, a tune that felt both ancient and deeply personal, she approached the towering stone archway that marked the archive's threshold. Her heart pounded not just with fear, but with a solemn purpose that had been forged in the echoes of the past. A shadow fell over her, vast and silent. The guardian beast descended from the sheer cliffs, its wings the color of twilight, and its eyes holding the cold fire of ancient stars. It was not a monster of mindless fury, but a creature of immense, focused power, its intelligence a palpable force in the air. It did not roar, it spoke, its voice the sound of granite shifting deep within the earth, and it offered her a choice. She could turn back and live, or face its test. To proceed was to risk her mind, for its challenge was one of illusion, a labyrinth of her own deepest desires and darkest fears, woven from pure magic. Elara felt a primal terror seize her, a cold certainty that she would fail, that she would be lost forever in a beautiful lie. But the spirit's protective melody still hummed in her veins, a thread of courage. She remembered her vow, her transformation from a seeker of personal redemption to a protector of a greater truth. She would not fight this being. She would not demand passage. She would approach it as she had the spirits, with humility and a song. Closing her eyes against the terrifying grandeur of the beast, she began to hum the harmonious hymn the valley had taught her. The melody was soft at first, a fragile thing against the guardian's immense presence. But as she poured her intent into the notes, her resolve to protect rather than to take, the music grew stronger. The air around the beast shimmered, the illusions it had begun to weave, visions of her family's name restored, and a life of scholarly adoration, dissolved into harmless mist before they could even fully form. The terrifying glare in its eyes softened to a gentle, approving glow. The great creature lowered its head in a gesture of profound respect. "You have not come to conquer," it said, its voice now a warm rumble. You have come to serve, the path is yours, I will carry you. But know this, little guardian, the final seal upon the inner sanctum does not yield to knowledge or strength. It yields only to an act of pure, selfless sacrifice. You must be willing to lose everything you have gained, without any promise of reward. As Elara climbed onto the beast's broad back, her heart soared with a mixture of relief and dread. The final test was not a puzzle she could solve with her intellect. It was a choice she would have to make with her soul. From this new vantage point, high above the valley floor, she saw a flicker of malevolent energy in the distance, a stain of purple-black light crawling over the ridge. Kalin, and he was not empty-handed. The beast confirmed her fear, its voice grave. He carries artifacts of blight, tools designed to twist and corrupt a guardian's purpose. If he reaches me before you complete your task, he will attempt to break my will and turn me into his weapon. The race was no longer just for knowledge. It was for the very soul of the guardian itself. With a powerful beat of its wings, the beast launched into the sky, the wind whipping past Elara's face as they flew toward the gleaming structure at the valley's heart. The dark flicker of Kalin's advance, a constant, grim reminder of what would be lost if she hesitated for even a moment. The hall was a silent symphony of suspended knowledge. Tomes of silver and obsidian drifted in a slow, graceful dance around colossal pillars, while platforms of polished crystal shifted and realigned with a soft, musical chime. There was no clear path, only a central dais glowing with faint, unlit symbols. Elara understood instantly. This was not a library to be browsed. It was a lock to be opened. The final puzzle required her to align the history of the world with the heavens themselves. She reached out, her fingers brushing a floating book. It opened, its pages projecting a vision of a great cataclysm, a starfall that had reshaped a continent. Another tome showed the political machinations that had erased her father's name from the records. Each event had a corresponding celestial sigil etched into the dais. Her mind, trained for such connections, worked feverishly. She placed the sorrow of her family's injustice beside the sigil for the mourner's star. She aligned the founding of the first elven city with the constellation of the crown. With each correct pairing, a platform would slide into place, creating a bridge deeper into the sanctum. The final alignment was the most profound. She took the vision of the archive's creation, this act of ultimate preservation, and placed it with the sigil for the eternal flame. A deep, resonant tone filled the hall. The central dais flared with brilliant light, and the final platform clicked into position, revealing an archway into a smaller, intensely luminous chamber. But the triumph was short-lived. A thunderous crack echoed as immense stone doors slammed down over the entrance she had used, sealing her inside. The gentle hum of the air grew faint, the atmosphere becoming stale. She was trapped. The archives had accepted her solution, but it had also activated its ultimate defense, a tomb for the unworthy. Panic clawed at her throat, but she forced it down. She had minutes, perhaps, before the air was gone. She sprinted into the core chamber, her eyes scanning the countless glowing scrolls and crystalline tablets. She had to choose what truth was worth dying for. Her heart screamed for the scroll that would clear her family's name, the personal redemption that had launched this entire journey. But her mind, now tempered by the journey, saw the larger picture. She bypassed the genealogy sections and went straight to the central pillar, where a single, pulsating crystal orb hovered. the core of Valinor. As her hands touched it, knowledge flooded into her, not as words, but as pure understanding. The energy of the Undying Lands was not infinite. It was a carefully balanced system, and the archives were its beating heart, redistributing magic to prevent barren wastes and chaotic tempests. But the core was dimming, its light flickering. An inscription glowed beside it. Only a heart that has chosen wisdom over desire and service over legacy can reignite the flame. The cost is all that you are. The air grew thin, spots dancing before her eyes. This was the selfless sacrifice the Guardian had spoken of. To save the archives, to maintain the world's balance, she would have to pour her own life force, her very essence, into the core. It would mean achieving her goal only to vanish within it, her story untold, her family's name forever stained. It was the ultimate choice between personal redemption and global harmony. And in that breathless moment, she knew her answer. Just as her resolve crystallized, a violent shudder rocked the chamber. From beyond the sealed door came the unmistakable sound of splintering stone and a triumphant roar. Kalin was breaking through. The ancient texts flared with a defensive, golden light around her as Elara placed both hands upon the fading core, ready to pay the price. The air grew thin and cold as the archives waited for her answer. A shimmering portal swirled into existence before Elara, offering a vision so potent it stole her breath. On one side, she saw her father's face, his name cleared, his honor restored in a brilliant public ceremony for all the world to see. Her family's legacy, the very thing that had driven her through every trial, was finally within her grasp. It was a clean, simple victory, a life of peace and respect, earned in an instant. The other side of the portal showed only the archives themselves, the vast and silent knowledge, protected and preserved for generations she would never meet. It was a future without her name, a sacrifice with no witness and no reward. This was the final test, not of her mind, but of her heart's deepest desire. To choose her family was to claim her prize and leave, but the vision showed the consequence. The moment she took that personal victory, the archives would seal themselves forever, their light dimming as the world's magical balance slowly, irrevocably frayed. The cost of her redemption would be the slow death of wonder itself, a sob caught in her throat, a raw sound of grief for the life she was about to surrender. She looked at her father's smiling face in the vision, and she whispered an apology into the thinning air. Then, with a final, shuddering breath, she turned her back on him. She chose the knowledge, she chose the greater good. The moment her decision was made, the vision shattered. A warmth like the first dawn flooded the chamber, pouring from the central crystal and into her. It was not a destructive fire, but an energy of pure creation, the essence of the Undying Lands. It flowed through her, mending the strained magical threads of the world, and she felt the archives themselves sigh in relief. They recognized her. She was not a thief, but the heir they had waited for. The sealed stone doors exploded inward in a shower of rock and dust. Kalin stood silhouetted in the breach, his form crackling with stolen, corrosive power, his eyes wide with shock at the blinding light now emanating from Elara. The chamber pulsed with a rhythm as steady as a heartbeat, every floating book and crystal now glowing with fierce, protective energy. Elara rose, no longer a desperate scholar, but a conduit of ancient power. She turned to face her rival, her own eyes holding the calm, terrifying light of the stars. The final confrontation was here, and she was ready. Kalin's charge faltered as the very air around him turned to crystal clarity. Elara did not raise a hand in violence. Instead, she channeled the archive's boundless light, not as a weapon, but as a mirror. She showed him not a future of his own glorious dominion, but the brutal, unvarnished truth his ambition had blinded him to. He saw cities choked by magical fallout, lands rendered barren by energy he had recklessly siphoned, and the faces of those he would have ruled not in admiration, but in terror and despair. He saw the world he would create, a monument not to his greatness, but to his profound loneliness. The vision struck a chord of memory, a flicker of the idealistic scholar he had once been, a man who truly believed knowledge could elevate everyone. That man had been buried under bitterness and exile, but he was not entirely gone. A raw, broken sound escaped Kalin's lips as the corrosive energy around him sputtered and died. The clarity was a physical pain, a shattering of the narrative of righteous vengeance he had built around himself. He looked at Elara, truly looked at her, and saw not an enemy to be crushed, but a custodian upholding the very principles he had once sworn to protect. In that surge of agonizing self-awareness, he made his choice. He would not be the destroyer. He would help her seal this power away, not as a thief, but as a final, redemptive act of preservation. The chamber groaned, its foundations shaking as the magical backlash from his corrupted artifacts destabilized the entrance. Great stone blocks began to rain down, sealing the only exit. There was no time for both of them to escape. Kalin met Elara's eyes, a grim, peaceful acceptance settling on his face. He shoved her toward the inner sanctum's core, toward safety. Then he turned, planting his feet and channeling the last dregs of his own considerable power, not to break, but to reinforce. He became a living barricade, a final shield against the collapsing mountain, holding the crushing weight of stone at bay through sheer force of will long enough for the archive's final protective wards to snap into place around Elara. His sacrifice was not a grand, dramatic explosion, but a quiet, steadfast act of holding the line until there was nothing left. As the last light faded from his eyes, the entrance sealed for eternity, and the only sound was the serene, restored hum of the knowledge he had helped save. Elara was alone, the last living soul in a tomb of wonders, the weight of a redeemed soul now part of its eternal legacy. Time itself seemed to hold its breath within the sanctum. The frantic energy of the confrontation gave way to a profound, humming stillness. Elara stood alone, the last echo of Kalin's sacrifice, fading into the serene pulse of the archives. In that silence, she felt a final, gentle shift. The knowledge of the Undying Lands did not simply reside around her. It flowed into her, not as a possession, but as a sacred trust. She was no longer a visitor. She was the anchor. Her first act as guardian was one of remembrance. She did not seek the scroll that would vindicate her father, for that quest now felt small and personal in the face of her new duty. Instead, she willed the archives to show her the truth of her family's past, and the crystalline walls responded. The full, unedited record of her father's trial unfolded before her, revealing the web of lies and the names of those who had crafted them. This truth was not for public spectacle, not a weapon for revenge, but a quiet, solemn acknowledgement for her own heart. His honor was restored in the only place that truly mattered now, within the eternal memory of this place. With that peace settled in her soul, she turned her will outward. Using the core of Valinor, she sent a silent call across the world, a subtle pull on the threads of magic that resonated only with those of pure intent and scholarly hearts. They came not to a hidden mountain, for the archive's physical location remained forever sealed, but to a shared vision in their dreams. Leor was among the first, his deep connection to the natural world making him a perfect steward. Elara established a new, dispersed order of guardians, scholars who would work in the waking world to maintain the balance she now oversaw from the heart of the magic. They became healers of corrupted lands, restorers of forgotten lore, and a quiet check against the kind of reckless ambition that had nearly destroyed everything. She often thinks of Kalin, not with bitterness, but with a sorrowful gratitude. His final choice became the foundational lesson for her new order, a permanent reminder that the pursuit of knowledge without wisdom is a path to ruin. His redemption, paid for with his life, ensured that future seekers would be guided by a different standard. The Undying Lands themselves began to heal and thrive, their energies flowing in harmonious cycles once more. From her silent watch, Elara feels the world's balance as a gentle, constant rhythm. The frantic scholar who once sought to erase a stain on her name is gone, replaced by a serene and eternal guardian. Her family's legacy is no longer a name in a history book, but the living, breathing health of the world itself. And in the quiet moments, she listens, waiting for the next pure heart that might one day be worthy of the secrets she is now sworn to protect.
you.